Wealth Builder, you are on a roll. Go on with your bad self. This is part 3 of the Beautiful Budget Workbook Getting Started mini-series. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. Up until now, we've taken some time to fill in multiple trackers. We've also kind of set the stage for a new month using the money calendar and the snapshots page. Now it's time to get to the real heart of the workbook, the heart of Beautiful Budget, and that is the money mantra. This is the budgeting framework that I built a handful of years ago. It's the very template that I use to completely change the tide for my finances and my family's finances. What you get with the money mantra is kind of an ordered checklist of sorts, letting you know, hey, here is the order that your money should flow out anytime that you are paid. Now, the Beautiful Budget Workbook can accommodate up to 3 budgets per month, at least in this first edition, this teal edition of the Beautiful Budget Workbook, which I didn't mention earlier, that the plan right now is to release a new design every summer. So this mini-series is all about the teal edition of the workbook, and I'm sure I'll release more Getting Started series as new designs come out and the worksheets evolve. But at least here for now, you can do up to 3 budgets a month in the workbook. So this is great for those of us who might budget, twice a month, who budget bi-weekly, because sometimes you might have a point where you have 3 paydays in 1 month. As you heard me mention in the last video, I always recommend that you budget based on when you're paid. That is, your budget periods match your pay cycles. And that way you never run into that situation where you're trying to carry money from one paycheck into a new set of bills or expenses. Everything is just kind of grouped together in a way that makes sense. And I think you'll get to see that a bit more through the series here. But the money mantra is what I'll kind of walk you through today and give you just kind of a broad brush of what these sections are, what you typically want to see in each section of this budget template, and other features of the money mantra. The fact that it's zero-based, meaning we're going to give every dollar a job. No penny is going to be left to chance. For every dollar that you anticipate coming in, we're going to give that dollar something to do in this budget. So you'll budget down to 0. I also mentioned that it's designed to be followed in order. And there are certain milestones that I recommend you kind of reach before you advance in the mantra. I cover these in depth in my e-course, Launchpad to Wealth, which is designed to accompany the Beautiful Budget Workbook. I mean, these are 2 peas in a pod. I honestly use the workbook for 70 to 80% of that course because I'm teaching you the money mantra and how to win in every section of this framework. So if you're watching these and you're really eager to learn more and truly dive in, I recommend that you look into Launchpad to Wealth, and I'll be sure to leave those details in the description. But this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you start right where you are with what you have and either continue building wealth or position yourself on the road to wealth. And the money mantra is how you get there. So let's take a look. I have found that the best way to explain the money mantra is visually. So I've got opened up here a set of money mantra budget pages. Just looking at how this is all laid out, the money mantra is a phrase, and I'll get to the phrase in just a moment, but it is a budgeting framework. It is what shapes this template, and it's designed to be followed in order. The mantra itself is a phrase. I'm going to zoom in on it here. Embrace every day and reject the poor life. So not only is this it's just a good kind of phrase to honor as you think about your budgeting process, you think about your money management, taking each day as a fresh one, welcoming it, and also having the mindset of not wanting to be poor in anything. Okay, poor and broke are different. You might hear me sometimes say broke on purpose. That's definitely a thing. And many budgeters, kind of support that movement of broke on purpose. But rejecting the poor life and saying, I'm not going to live poorly. I'm going to live a life that is fulfilling, and I am going to build wealth as best I can, right? So that is the money mantra. But not only is it just, a sweet phrase to kind of follow in your money management, it's also a mnemonic device. So the first letter of each of these words corresponds to a section of the template. So opening this back up here, your E here in Embrace, expenses, E for emergency fund, D for debt beyond the minimum or extra debt payments, R for retirement/savings, T for tree, P for priorities, and L for luxuries. All right, so I mentioned how this template is designed to be followed in order. So anytime that we're paid, we're going to list that income here in the income section, and we're going to direct our money all the way through this template down to zero. So let's just go ahead and take a closer look at this top section over here. This area is to list the start and end dates of your budget. So let's say I budget solo, I'm paid bi-weekly, and I'm paid every other Friday. So I'm going to take February 11th, and it's going to go until, now the 25th is my next payday. So this budget is going to end on the 24th. Okay, each payday is kind of launching a new budget. So there's my budget period. And as we look at income, naturally we're going to think, your paycheck. Maybe you're a salaried employee, you're thinking about your paycheck. You might be thinking about income you make from like a side gig, side hustle, side business. But I also want you to consider that a starting balance in your account would go here. Cash that you roll over from the previous budget period would go here. Another thing would be savings transfers. So let's say you've got an outside, a separate savings account from your checking, and that's where you stage your sinking funds, which I call savings buckets. Let's say that's where you have that money, and maybe you've got some money set aside for a vacation, but you're actually going to take that vacation during this budget period. You would want to list it here as an income source because you're going to list that savings transfer, and then you're going to write out all of your travel spending into the budget. Right? So that is how that would work for a savings transfer. So just kind of think of all of these different sources. So I'm just going to write here, we're going to say I'm budgeting solo here, and we're going to say my paycheck is $2,500. And let's say that's all I anticipate. I'm not going to put like a starting balance. Let's assume I'm not going to roll any money into this budget. We're going to keep it simple with just my W-2, my salaried position, my paycheck from that. The very first section, once we have our income determined and totaled, we're going to jump into expenses. Now, expenses break down into two types. You have fixed expenses and you have variable expenses. A good rule of thumb to remember fixed expenses is those are the ones with a due date. Whether it's your electric bill, your rent, your cell phone bill, your Hulu subscription. Those are going to be fixed expenses versus your variable ones that can kind of fluctuate month to month. They can vary. Something like groceries, dining out, gas for your car, right? Those would be variable costs, and they're not associated with a due date. They're going to kind of flow throughout your pay cycle, and they can change month to month. So kind of take that approach of listing out your bills. Once you get really comfortable, you can start to list them in order. So in order by the date that they're due. And you're going to list your fixed ones up top and then your variable ones below that. All right. So let's say, again, we're looking at the period February 11th through February 24th. So not only am I only including the income from that budget period, I'm only going to include expenses from that budget period. So this is where I would go back and reference my money calendar and say what bills are coming out during that time frame. So just kind of drawing out what this might look like for the expenses section, the 11th to the 24th. Notice how we listed our fixed ones, we listed our variable expenses, but notice how I don't have like a miscellaneous, I don't have like fun money, those sorts of things aren't listed here. This section being at the very front, we want to make sure that we are including here those necessary and routine expenses. All right. And if you have found that these subscriptions, these extra subscriptions that you might have, Netflix, Hulu, Peloton, that those are affordable, that they're routine, that they're highly important in your household, perfectly fine to put them in the expenses section. Some people think that Netflix should go in like luxuries or priorities, but those have become part of your routine. You've got a fixed due date that you pay that, And until you come to a situation where you're evaluating whether or not that's affordable, listing it here is really not an issue. Right? But there is one thing I want to add here before I move on to section 2, or before I move on to kind of crunching numbers and seeing what I have left. We're going to add a cushion. You can call this a cushion, a safety net, a buffer. This is going to be money that sits in my checking account and kind of catches slight overspending. And this is why I say a zero-based budget is not so scary when you start to really look at it, because when you're budgeting in a cushion, you realize that yes, you're giving every dollar a job, but your cushion serves to help you not actually reach zero in your account. All right. So looking at this time frame being a couple weeks, and this, we're assuming that I budget solo here. I would be okay with a $100 or $150 cushion. All right. I'm going to go ahead and write $150. We are actually a family of 4, and I budget $200 for every budget, and we budget twice a month. And we're going to want to add together everything that I've listed so far. All right, so $1,212 is my total for my expenses section. So I'm going to calculate, and you're going to do this for every section of the money mantra, but we're going to calculate, okay, well, what does that leave me to go into the next section? And how we calculate this is we take our total income, A, and we subtract what we've got so far. So we're going to take this $2,500 income and subtract this $1,212. And it's going to leave me with $1,288 left as I go into section 2, which is the emergency fund contribution. Now, your emergency fund is there to help you when crap hits the fan, right? Loss of a job, death or injury of a loved one, and now you've got unexpected travel, true emergencies. Okay, maybe, a car accident and you've got some costs to cover that you didn't anticipate. We all need an emergency fund. And assessing how much you need, a good kind of rule of thumb to follow is 3 to 6 months of core expenses saved. And when I say core expenses, I'm referring to those truly necessary expenses. So looking at this one, car payment, water bill, loan minimum payment, internet, groceries, dining out, gas, dog, and we wouldn't include the cushion. But we're going to calculate all of those necessary costs across an entire month, multiply that by 3, and that gives you a good kind of start to a healthy emergency fund. I would need to take my other budgets across the month-long period to be able to add everything up and determine what my core expenses are. But let's say they're in the league of maybe $3,000 a month. So I need to save up 9, 10, 12 grand to really be in that healthy range for my emergency fund. Now I have $1,288 going into this next section. Am I going to put every single dollar in there? Let's say I have no emergency fund at this point. This is where the money mantra starts to become an art and less of a science. The more examples that you see me walk through, the more this kind of starts to make sense. But I am not of the mindset that you have to take every extra penny and devote it to your emergency fund and just be kind of so strict in that way that you stop there and that's your entire budget. I like to multitask my money. I really do. And it's also how I coach. I try to coach reaching multiple goals, trying to reach multiple goals simultaneously. I'm not going to write anything in. I'm going to kind of zoom out literally and figuratively and kind of think about some things. Multiple things are going to play into kind of what I decide to do with this 1,288 and how I kind of spread it across the remaining sections. One of those assessments I need to make is, what does my debt look like? If I have high interest debt, I really want to make sure I'm putting something in here. So if I can maybe do 1,000 here and the remainder goes here, that's good. Okay. And that would be it. I would budget down to 0 with just these 3 sections for this particular budget. Okay. And maybe you're thinking, gosh, that leaves no room. Rachel, you didn't put any fun or any like going out with the girls, going to the bar. You didn't put any of that over here. Understand that the more you stay on budget, this cushion can be kind of that little treat at the end of your budget where you can use that as kind of miscellaneous or fun money, travel money, those sorts of things. Okay, so keep in mind, you do have a little bit here that can come back to you if you're able to stay on budget. It's not so tight that there's no wiggle room. Okay, so kind of think back to that expenses section and the buffer that we put in. But I'm looking at my debt, and let's say I don't have credit card debt. And let's say my car payment is maybe at 3% and my student loan is maybe at, let's say 5.5%. I am going to go ahead and personally make the decision that I'm not going to accelerate my debt payoff for my car and for my student loan because the interest rates are such that I believe on average I can invest and beat those percentages. So this is not going to be a section that I really pay attention to. Okay. Now, again, we follow the mantra in order. Can you skip sections? Absolutely. This is a section that we skip every single budget. But you're going to kind of make an assessment at each of these sections in order. All right. So now we kind of know we're not going to really be doing anything here. Now, if debt freedom is super important to me, and regardless of interest rates, I really don't want to be tied to a lender whatsoever, no matter what the numbers tell me, I probably am going to be in here because I don't want to be in debt any longer than I have to. And that's a personal call. That's something I cannot decide for you. I am always going to coach that there is a savvy way to invest and pay off debt at the same time. Pretty important that you understand that that's kind of my philosophy. I don't approach debt payoff with needing to be debt-free right away as soon as possible. That's just not how I approach that aspect of money management. So, okay, we're not going to be here in this section. As we look at retirement/savings, this is where we look at, investing in an IRA, building up savings buckets, all these sorts of things. And maybe I am saving up to go to a friend's wedding. And I know that that's a savings bucket that I really need to pour into because I know that event is coming. I can go back and reference my savings bucket tracker at the beginning of the workbook and see what did I kind of estimate I could do month to month inside of this section. And that would be an element that would guide what I put here. Now, I don't have children. Let's say I don't tithe. I don't, give to family members, anything like that. And so maybe this is a section that I skip as well. But what you would see here, you could have 529s or other investment accounts that can be used to save up funds for your child's future. UTMA, UGMA, could be a custodial Roth. Those would go here because those are investing for your children. We invest for our children after we invest for ourselves. All right, we're following the mantra in order. Tithes, other things like that would go here in the tree section. Let's say that's not appropriate for me. We're not going to be putting anything in there. Priorities and luxuries. When you're budgeting solo, these are kind of one and the same. So in my case, I'm really looking at kind of what is fulfilling to me. What is something that really brings me joy and happiness that I want to devote money to? This could be travel. It could be going to sports events. Maybe you want season tickets, right, for your favorite team. Maybe it is new tech for your office. It could be a variety of things. And this is us making sure that we are happy wealth builders, right? And we're not penny pinching wealth builders that never really treat ourselves to anything that brings us joy. We're going to make sure that if we can, that we're nourishing that kind of fulfillment portfolio is what I call it. So when you're budgeting single, these are kind of both in that lane. They're kind of that fun money fulfillment area. When you are budgeting as a household, this is where I want you to stop and say, what is something that we all agree, every stakeholder in this budget, what is something that we all agree would go in this section? For example, renovating the kitchen, going on a marriage retreat. It could be, a soccer camp for your child. Maybe you're saving up money to adopt a pet, right? Things that everybody agrees kind of spending money on. Because in a lot of cases, there's some joint aspect to the money when we're talking about household budgeting. Not all the time, okay, but most of the time I would argue that there are joint aspects to it. So with joint money involved, we got to stop and make sure, okay, are we all still on the same page that we want to spend joint funds here? And there's another section beyond that, because inevitably what we find is that there are things that are jointly appreciated and you want to jointly pursue, but there are things that are individual pursuits. Maybe it's a business venture. Hey, I want to start this business on the side. I want to devote funds to this hobby. And, my spouse doesn't necessarily want to see joint dollars going to that. New clothes. It could be, brunch with the girls, personal money. In our home, we call it hubby and wifey funds. I've seen it like be happy funds. I've seen it, just simple fun money. Okay. Lots of different names for it, but they all kind of mean the same thing. Truly individual funds. Kind of a judgment-free zone is ideal here when we're looking at luxuries, but that's where the line gets drawn when you're a household budget. But you can see how these lines get blurred when you budget on your own. It's all kind of that fulfillment, fun area. And let's say I'm sitting back and I'm assessing, I would love to save up for a camper. Maybe that's something that I have always wanted to save up for. So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind too. And I'm assessing, I've got $1,288. And I can stretch that across a few sections. Now, do I need to be aggressive over here? Yes, I really do, because I have no emergency fund. I need to be aggressive, right? So see how I kind of zoomed out, kind of guesstimated some things, basically kind of like wrote in pencil in my head, if you will, of what could this look like? Because you have to assess a lot of different aspects of your money to really see how the mantra can play out. Because I'm not of the mindset that you kind of live on page one if you're in debt and you have no emergency fund. That is the type of budgeting approach that's going to wear you down so fast. So I'm of the mindset, try to achieve balance when you can, even if it's $20 that goes to yourself, to treat yourself to something nice, maybe your favorite ice cream cone or something like that, an ice cream date with your spouse, something to keep you fulfilled. Keep pouring into your cup, your spouse's cup, and kind of make these things happen, because otherwise you're gonna burn out and you're not gonna find budgeting approachable or enjoyable or any of that. All right. So just understand that it kind of starts to become an art form with your own particular situation. If you're a biweekly budgeter and your dates kind of fall in different ways every time, same would be true if you're paid kind of sporadically. Okay, you have kind of unexpected paydays and they vary. You're going to want to budget at least 2 budgets out in front of you and be sure that if you need to do a rollover, that you've got it budgeted in. So let's say I go in and I draft the next budget. I'm able to pay my bills. I have a cushion. I can even put a little bit into my emergency fund. So I say, look, I'm good. I don't need to roll money over. I can come back over here and I can say, I'm going to put $1,000 into my emergency fund. So that means the total for this section is $1,000. So I now take my $1,288 minus $1,000. That leaves me $288. We talked about how I'm going to skip the extra debt payments, primarily because I'm not paying off high interest debt, and being completely debt free isn't something that is super high priority for me. And let's say I'm contributing to an employer sponsored fund, but I also want to go over and pursue a Roth IRA. I can come over here and write that in. And then we talked about saving up for a friend's wedding. Okay, so that leaves this section at a total of $288 left. I'm not going to put anything in tree. And as I look kind of at this fulfillment area of the budget, this is where I'm going to look at saving some money for the camper and maybe putting aside a little bit of money for myself. Okay, so I'm giving every dollar a job, all the way down to $0. And if I were going to use cash envelopes, let's say maybe I put my groceries, dining out, gas, etc. over here in cash envelopes, I would write the description of the envelope and I would say, here's how much is going into each envelope, and it would match what I have over here. Okay, and that's where I would kind of budget for the cash envelope area. The category legend is a place where you can write out your budget categories: housing, investing, saving, subscriptions, different kind of, think of it like the filing cabinet for your budget. And you can list them out, and maybe you want to take highlighters and you want to color code across your budget to kind of mark what everything is in terms of category. And the reason it can make sense to go ahead and mark everything here is at the end of the month, you're going to be asked to put in projected totals by category. So basically, what did you budget for every category? All right, so I'm looking at 100 for investing. I'm going to go ahead and put Amy's wedding and camper as savings buckets. So let's say that's the 160 there, plus the emergency fund savings, so actually 1,160. All right, so you can just kind of see where I'm going here is I'm adding up projected totals. And the reason I'm doing that is it's gonna make it that much easier for me to add up all my totals when I do the summary. I mentioned in video 1, the Google Sheet will save you so much time because it'll do all of these calculations for you. It will do all of this for you, okay? Because in the Google Sheet, you're gonna categorize everything as you go. So keep that in mind. It would have probably saved me about 10 minutes here. I wouldn't have had to do all of the math. I could just let the Google Sheet kind of prep all of it for me. Also do this math over here. And then what I tend to do is once the budget is ready and it's zeroed out, I copy it into my physical workbook. And here is where I go into my day-to-day tracking. And the next video is going to cover kind of that budget upkeep. And what are we going to do day-to-day to follow this budget as best we can, and then proceed to close it out. So hope you found this helpful. Hope the money mantra makes a lot more sense at this point, and we'll see you in the next video.